how much you're going to get paid is not based off of how much you're worth. It's based off of how much the role is worth.
Yep.
So, for example, if you are building a tool that is a SaaS product, that is a revenue generating digital solution, you can expect to get paid more.
Welcome everyone to the TechGuide podcast, where we give actual advice to those wanting to break into tech or are looking for their next gig. We have Erik Andersen, aka the world's happiest engineer, on the pod. Welcome, Erik. So excited to have you on.
Thanks, Ryan. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And you have a heck of a background in content creation and within this industry. April 2020, take us back to this moment, because I think you started a little initiative where you want to post on social media every single day. What really prompted this?
Yeah, so currently now, recording this 3.5 years later, all of my content is focused around the job search. I guess the origin story of a lot of that was April 2020 with my own job search. Even though I had about 8 years of experience at that time, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I struggled to find a lot of people interested in the experience that I was bringing to the table. So part of that was I had a very small network, so I figured, well, I probably need to be doing something differently, because even as an experienced developer, cold application was not getting me very far.
Yeah.
So went through that process, learned some things, and then in the years since that, trying to share things from my own experience, sharing experience from the juniors I've mentored, the interviews that I've held, and just trying to pay it back where I can.
Yeah, and what I think is so cool about that is, like, it really started out with like, oh, I have a really small network right now, but I'm looking to grow this. And social media is a great way to do that. And I imagine throughout that all, you met some incredible people, and it has been a great networking tool for you.
Like right here, right now, this conversation, Ryan, us meeting is kind of a result of a lot of that effort, right?
Yeah, it's really cool because, like, social media, it is such a powerful engine. And if you're posting on LinkedIn, Twitter, like really putting yourself out there, it does open up so many opportunities, as you've seen, to content creation, actually getting yourself out there and opening new doors.
Yeah, and it can kind of be a slow burn depending on how you approach it.
Yeah.
I know from my own story, I posted every weekday for 2 years before I got any
Wow.
significant traction. And part of that was my own journey. I was doing it, on the side. I didn't really have an objective besides just meeting people. But you eventually learn how to craft your posts, what's a good engaging hook, what topics are interesting to your audience,
Yeah.
when to post. You kind of have to figure all that out on your own. So it took me about 2 years to refine that. And then the last year and a half has been an incredible journey.
Absolutely. And you have refined that to a science now, because now you're teaching us about tech job placement. You have boot camps, workshops, you mentor. What really called you to this specific vertical to like work in here?
I guess two milestones on my own journey. That was when I graduated school, I had a good friend who had several years of experience but did not have a formal college degree, and he struggled to find work. And I had worked with him at a previous company, and I knew he was wonderful.
Yeah.
So trying to be the good friend that I was, I put a lot of energy and effort into finding him a role, and he found one, and it was incredible. And it changed his life. He was a new father, struggling to provide, put food on the table for his young family, and just seeing the impact that had on him. And every now and again, I'll check in on him to see how he's doing. And all of the hard work really was him. It's his own skills. He had to go through the interview, so I don't want to feel like he got that job because of me, or his life is he owes it to me. But to be a part of that story has been incredibly fulfilling to me. So that was back at the very early stages of my professional career. So it's always been on the back of my mind, how could I do this more?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second aspect of this was I pursued my career going up the corporate ladder. I made it into management, and I hated it. All the fun stuff about coding and work was now gone. I wasn't playing with my Lego blocks, my coding blocks all day. It was budgeting, it was finances, it was issue escalation, it was stakeholder management, it was deadlines, and blah, blah, blah. So I made an intentional choice for my own mental health to go back to an individual contributor role, but I wanted to keep the part of it that I really enjoyed, and that was the mentoring of newer developers. So that's what I try to do now. I still am an individual contributor. I'm a tech lead for my backend team here at Yum, but still I scratch the other itch in helping others with my online activity.
Absolutely. And we're going to dive into that right now because you continue to mentor developers. And let's start about the job search. People want to know, it's really hard right now to find a job as a software developer at any job right now. It's very hard to find. It's always an adventure. It's always hard to do. Let's say you are ready to do this. Let's just say like, hey, I'm looking for my first software developer role. Maybe it's from a career change right out of school. What would be like the first step that you would take or that you would direct someone to take when starting their job search as a software developer?
Yeah, there are two aspects here. I know you asked for one thing. I want to give you two here. And the first is I want you to think about your job search from the employer's perspective. Because so many developers I see, they create a basic resume, they even create a portfolio. I'm sure they're excellent developers. And then they send out a bunch of applications and then they complain that, nobody's hiring or I'm just getting ignored or I'm getting ghosted, nobody's responding. So the first, I just want you to approach the job search from the employer's perspective. I want you to empathize with that. Although I know it's difficult. From a employer's perspective, speaking pretty directly, you all look the same. You all have just recently graduated from like a 16 to 20 week program. You all have some background in an unrelated field. Your projects you highlight on your resume are very similar, and you all have the same amount of experience, and that is 0.
Yeah.
So the reason why I want you to think about this from the employer's perspective is that the answer to how to get that first job in tech is to do all of the things that most everybody else is not doing so that you stand out.
Right.
So second thing, the biggest differentiator for career transitioners, or really any role, is relevant work experience.
Yeah.
But then how do you get experience if you can't get a job? If you can't get a job because you don't have experience, right?
Yeah.
And that is, as somebody who's reviewed resumes, if I have hundreds or thousands of new job applicants to an entry-level role, which I've had before, it is those that not just say that they're passionate developers, but those that show it. So you show it through volunteer work. You can go online and find Code for America or Donate Code or something to show that you're engaged with the community. You can do freelance or contract work with a family member or friend. Or you can maybe start your own little LLC, try to put some product out there. All of these, while maybe you're not getting paid for it, are still technically work experience line items that you can put on your resume and are the evidence of the passionate software engineer, that assertion that you make on your resume. So anyway, to summarize, empathize with employers and then differentiate in the ways that are the most meaningful to that employer, and that is giving yourself experience.
I think that's really cool, the volunteer perspective, because it is a great way to get experience. But I want to touch on a point that you talked on for your point number one, is you said to do something that other people in tech aren't doing when it comes to their job search and standing out. Can you give us a breakdown of what that was or what that is?
What people typically do?
Yeah, and what can we do to stand out? Yeah.
Yeah. So the typical new developer storyline is they have no experience. They go to some boot camp, do some self-taught program, graduate, and then they just start bulk applying everywhere they can see.
Yep.
And so one, I kind of mentioned this earlier, all of your resumes look the same. Your capstones are roughly the same. And you're all applying to the same openings, which an aspect of that, when I talk about empathizing with the employer for a bit, a lot of employers, yes, will post entry-level openings on the big job boards. But remember, it costs them money to post openings there. Or
Mm-hmm.
if they, hire a recruiter to help find a role, they have to pay that recruiter. So for an entry-level role where they already are getting probably hundreds of applicants, I'm not going to say most, but a lot of companies will choose to forego that cost and not post junior openings on big job boards, but
Interesting.
instead will post them on their company's website.
And
Or they will try to look up junior developers themselves on LinkedIn
yeah,
just by doing, a Boolean search. And reach out directly so they can avoid the recruiter fees. So part of the drama and the difficulty here is that all of you are applying to the same subset of roles on these big boards, but instead you should be trying to differentiate yourself on LinkedIn so that these companies, these smaller, medium-sized companies that can't afford recruiters,
yep.
will find you, or you should be reaching out to them directly, and finding their company website.
Yeah.
And applying there.
I remember when I was first applying for jobs right after college, what I would do is I would go find a job posting, apply for it. Then I'd also just go find a random recruiter in this company if I could find like the one, like of course them. And then I would send them just like an email. I'd find their email and just send them an email and say like, hey, I'm super interested in XYZ position. I'm attaching my resume and here are 3 bullet points about me. And that seemed to work like very well and is a super actionable item that people can take to really stand out in their job search.
Yeah, because once again, empathizing with the employer here for a bit, you're looking at your spreadsheet of applicants, and you have a few hundred from your job posting on Indeed.com or you got from the recruiter, and there's a price tag next to each one of these. If I hire this person, I have to pay $12,000, right? Or whatever your negotiated fee with the recruiting firm is. Or I can interview this other person who looks the same as the others who applied through, a big job board, but they're free because they reached out directly and applied on our company website. The value equation is a lot different.
Yep.
They'll be more likely to interview in the latter case. Or if you get a referral from somebody at that company, contacting a recruiter or another engineer at that company. So a specific strategy, you mentioned one. I want to call it another one that I was talking with David Roberts, who's another content creator in this space, that I thought was really interesting. So he used to work as an agency recruiter.
Yeah.
So he talked about trying to mimic what they do. Because these agency recruiters, a big thing they do is just cold calling companies trying to open up positions that aren't currently advertised. There's less competition and it's easier for them to make money that way. So similarly, he suggested going on LinkedIn, finding skills in your local market, or finding companies in your local market that use the skills that you specialize in, and then going to that company's website and applying directly. Or even if there aren't any applications, just on the contact form for that company and sending a message through there. And if you can try to kind of create an opening that doesn't already exist, then the competition is going to be a lot lower. And that's the big drama right now, is just how competitive the market is.
Yeah, it's crazy competitive. And I love that strategy because it really does make you stand out. It's all about standing out. And I love the emphasis you're putting on going directly to the website, because I believe there is really something to be said when you apply to LinkedIn with 500 other applicants compared to when you apply directly on the website where there's probably a lot less. And like you said, to employer, it's all the same sheet of paper. You all have the same experience. And so it's finding ways to stand out just like that.
Yeah, and you're free, right?
Yeah.
Standing out. I mean, so finding other ways you can differentiate yourself. So something that statistic I read the other day. So don't quote me on this because I can't remember the article.
No one hold Erik to it.
Be accountable. But it was something like 70% of software engineers reported that they are looking for remote work. Actively looking for remote work, or they will not accept an offer that is not a remote work offer. So like something like 70%, which means if you apply to an in-person or even hybrid role, the competition for those roles is going to be a lot less.
Yeah.
So if you may not be able to differentiate in the sense that you can get amazing experience on your resume to make you stand out from other applicants. But if you are willing to relocate, willing to travel, willing to work in person, willing to do the things that others may not be willing to do, willing to maybe start off at a lower pay, maybe working off hours.
Yep.
You kind of have to, everybody has to determine what works for their family, what works for their own mental health. I'm not saying, go destroy yourself out there, but if there are compromises and negotiations that you can make, you should be willing to do anything you can, because once you have a few years of experience, the whole world opens up and it becomes a lot easier.
For sure. I think it's super interesting right now as well, because there has been such a big shift into back to like in office, where these remote jobs are probably hyper competitive. And you just need to find a way to stand out. One way that I do want to talk about standing out is on LinkedIn itself. Let's just say entry level, someone's just like a senior in college or like a year out of college. What are some specific ways that they can differentiate themselves on their LinkedIn?
Once again, I got to give a shout out to David Roberts, because he has an ebook on this. It's really all about, I guess, optimizing for the algorithm and then optimizing for the human reading it. So when I say optimizing for the algorithm, that means you need to choose 3 to 5 keywords that are the most relevant to your tech stack that the recruiters are going to be searching for. So that's typically like a language, a framework, or a platform. So like React, AWS, .NET, C#, whatever your stack is. Identify the top 3 to 5, and you kind of need to litter that in your profile. So to be specific, I'm talking about in your header section, right underneath your name on LinkedIn, in your About Me. You can list those in your featured section. You link to your GitHub and put the text there too. You can turn on creator mode, even if you're not, a content creator. You can still register yourself with LinkedIn as being a quote unquote knowledge expert in a specific hashtag. So you can put, hashtag React, hashtag Java on there. Linking any of your work experience line items or school experience or project experience with those skills. Add those skills, get endorsed for those skills. If you're coming from a cohort, you all should be endorsing each other for those skills. Complete the quiz assessments for those skills, because that's what recruiters are going to be doing. One, so they are going to be searching for developers by a skill. So you want to make sure from an algorithms perspective, you are SEO optimized for all of them. And at the same time, you're optimizing it for the human reading it. Because at least, I'm speaking from the recruiters that I've talked to in my own experience here, but when you have 700 applicants for an entry-level role, you don't have a lot of time to review every applicant before you either decide to move on or reject. So you're skimming at this point their resume and their LinkedIn. And if it's not abundantly obvious that you're going to be a great fit for the role we're looking for, I'm going to put you in my discard pile.
And I love the tip right there about like just litter your whole LinkedIn with like AWS, JavaScript, like all these terms that they're going to be looking for. Because like you said, and when a recruiter's sitting down to look at this, it's either black or white. It's either like yes or no. Like there's no in between here. And so you want to make sure that it's skimmable for the algorithms, but also skimmable for the person that's actually reading it.
LinkedIn serves 2 purposes when it comes to representing your experience. One aspect of it is representing what you've done, and the other aspect is representing who you want to be. So a lot of people a lot of new developers I talk to are nervous about putting things like software engineer in their header, or they're nervous about putting even software engineer's work experience on their LinkedIn. So I've seen LinkedIn profiles where it still says, barista at Starbucks. And maybe in their About Me, in the second paragraph, it talks about what they want to be. And it's like, no, I'm not going to, I have no idea who you are, what you're doing. Why did a barista just apply to my software engineering role when there's very little evidence that they've even done anything? So even if you've never been hired formally as a software engineer, you still put software engineer, front end, whatever, as your header. And then I commonly say your first work experience line item at a minimum should be freelance, contract, software engineer, or whatever your ideal title is. People feel nervous. Oh, am I lying here by putting work experience when I haven't been formally hired by a company? I mean, freelance work, contract work, that's all self-employment. You can put whatever the freak
Yeah.
you want there.
Hey, seriously.
Yeah. And as long as you're actively building something to maybe put out as a SaaS product, or maybe you're trying to build something for a local community group, church organization, or friend.
Yeah.
I mean, contract work doesn't have to, work experience doesn't have to require the exchange of money to qualify as work experience. As long as you're delivering value over, probably a sustained amount of time where you make a significant contribution to it, you can put that as work experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And that hits on like a point you talked about earlier. It's just like volunteer experience, build something and put that on your LinkedIn. Like, do not be afraid to put that on your LinkedIn that you worked with a church organization to set up software, or that you worked with local food bank to set up software. I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. And you should put that on your LinkedIn.
My first work experience line item was an unpaid internship that was 4 to 8 hours a week. So not even technically part-time.
Yeah.
But I was contracted over like a 6-month period. It was mostly SEO optimization stuff. So I was mostly changing like text on HTML pages, updating tags. But it technically was software development. It was code.
It was code.
So I put that as work experience on my resume, and I just kind of parlayed that, forward and forward until I was able to, get a formal, 9 to 5 as a software engineer.
I love that. And so we've talked a lot about like breaking in the door. How are some ways that you can differentiate and like actually get your foot in the door? Let's just say you get that first interview with a software developer. What are like 2 ways that you can stand out in the interview process?
Yeah, I think first is to recognize what interview are you up for. So, because each group that you talk to is going to have a different objective, so the success criteria is different. So, at a minimum, you can expect 3 types of interviews. There's going to be the technical screen with a recruiter. Then there's going to be a technical assessment with a hiring manager or technical member of the team. And then oftentimes there's like a behavioral interview with the executive team, or series of executives, or series of team members.
Yep.
So to talk about those 3 specifically for what success looks like. So the technical recruiter is oftentimes not very technical. They can't tell the difference between, a coding language and a Pokemon.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to, disparage recruiters. They're wonderful. True. Love them. It's just an aspect of the game here. So when you're in the the screen, the phone screen, they are just trying to make sure you check as many boxes as possible on the job opening.
Yep.
And that you pass. You can speak at least comfortably to most of the information there. So they're going to ask some very high level questions to check off some boxes. So the success criteria there is just making sure you have a good story for every line item on your resume. And a lot of the homework is done beforehand, and making sure that your resume matches as many skills listed on the job description as possible, and that you're able to talk about it. So the second interview, the technical interview. So this one's a little bit hard to game as well, because the technical interview can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Sometimes it's a technical Q&A session where you kind of just get quizzed and you just talk about it. Sometimes it's a whiteboarding thing where you're doing pseudocode and some solution design. Sometimes it's an actual like elite code style data structures and algorithm assessment where you have to actually fix something.
Yep.
Sometimes it is representative of your day-to-day, where you have to add a form to a page or fix a small bug, and they'll walk you through it. And sometimes it's a take-home assessment. So you don't have to worry about the interview really at all, because you can do that on your own in your free time. But I would say general principles here for the technical interview is to understand that getting the answer is maybe only 50% of what they are trying to evaluate.
Mm-hmm.
The other part that they're trying to evaluate is how you think. So, for example, whenever I approached the technical interview, oftentimes I never even finished it. And I would still get moved on to the next phase because they were impressed with how I thought. And so I want to talk about that for a little bit. So when I would get the question, a lot of it is reading through it, and then you start by asking clarifying questions. Okay, so now the interviewer sees that, okay, you are a detail-oriented individual. You think comprehensively about solutions before you just dive into the code.
Yep.
Okay, so you have this kind of this back and forth asking questions about edge cases, what have you. Then you start writing some unit tests or just some basic assertions for these edge cases to confirm your understanding. So that shows them that, okay, like you're a test-driven developer, you're a quality-driven developer. You do that. And then as you approach the problem, you start talking through your solution. And before I would even start writing code, I would just do everything as comments. Okay, well, first, comment first, iterate through the array. Okay, next comment, I need to grab the last item in the array or this item at this index. Next thing, okay, I'm going to have to put it here. And I'm just doing all of that in comments so they can see, once again, I'm a detail-oriented, thoughtful individual. And then, I start marching through and trying to solve it. And sometimes that takes up most takes up most of the interview, and you can escape without having to dive into the nitty-gritty of it. Yeah. And then the third interview, okay, now we're into the behavioral interview. So once again, going back to what my original assertion about you need to empathize with employers for a bit. So put yourself in the shoes of the person who's interviewing you. Most likely they are understaffed. That's why they're hiring, which means they are incredibly busy, which means they don't have a lot of time to prepare for your interview, which means as they're running around throughout their day, they sit down maybe a few minutes before and they think, oh, shoot, what am I interviewing for again? And it is not uncommon for those interviewers to then see, oh, okay, this is for the React position for this one team, and then Google common behavioral interview questions or common React interview questions. Well, they're doing that Google search, which means you can do the same Google search. You can do that before, and you can prepare certain answers to know what you're going to get hit with. So it's kind of an open book test at that point. So anyway, that was my long-winded answer for how to stand out and prepare for each of the different interviews.
No, I love that. It's what I really liked about that was the thought process that they care about maybe the answer, but they want to know your thought process and more. I remember, so I'm not technical at all. I remember when I was interviewing for a sales role, we had to sit down and speak to the director of sales and do a mock interview call with them. And they don't really care how you do. They want to know, are you open to feedback? Are you assertive? When you're talking, they don't actually care if you sell it to them or not. They just want to know, is this person open to feedback? Are they coachable? Because you want to do well, but at the same time, it is also those interpersonal skills of thinking critically.
Yeah, you can be incredibly good at your craft.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an absolute jerk to work with,
exactly,
nobody's going to want to work with you. I'm sure exceptions exist, but I'm speaking in the majority of cases that the soft skills, how quickly you can create rapport with your interviewer, how friendly you are. I mean, they do play an element in who gets hired.
Yeah, for sure. I feel a lot of it, like you said, is just being a good person, being a good teammate. That'll take you way farther in your career than actually being, maybe, I can't say that for sure, but it might take you farther than actually being a great software developer. So always something to note when you're coming out of school, especially that's something that I note as well. And I do want to talk about, just so we kind of make our way down, let's say we get the job offer, boom. How do you direct entry-level salespeople or entry-level software developers? Do you recommend that they negotiate any of the terms or the salaries, or how do you coach that?
Yeah, so I am this is a controversial take.
Oh, I like
if these. Well, I will first say, if you feel that the offer was such a low ball that it's insulting, or if you feel confident in your negotiation skills, sure, come up with a counter offer based off of market evidence.
Yeah.
But once again, empathizing with the employer here, they have no idea. I guess two things. One, they have no idea how much you're worth because they really have no idea if you can do the job. They have some evidence based off of what you presented. But as an entry-level developer, they assume, okay, you have some schooling, but how much can you really do? How much have you really worked with the team? We don't know.
Yeah.
So you are a big question mark. So any number you throw out there for like, well, the average salary is XYZ, it's like, well, that's average, but we have no idea if
Who
you
are you?
are average or if you are below average or if you are above average. So first, I just want to say it's incredibly difficult for companies to price that right. So I wouldn't get angry if it's below what you expect.
Yep.
The second thing is how much you're going to get paid is not based off of how much you're worth. It's based off of how much the role is worth.
Yep.
So, for example, if you are building a tool that is a SaaS product, that is a revenue generating digital solution, you can expect to get paid more because the company wants to attract better developers so they can build a better product so they can make more money. You are a revenue generating function. But if you are going to be maintaining some internal system that maybe is less used or supports some other business function, you are now a cost of doing business, and their objective is going to be to minimize that cost. So just keep in mind, it's not, I hear on LinkedIn about know what you're worth, blah, blah, blah. It's not that at all. It's like saying, it's all very much dependent on the context of the company that you're working for. So I say all of those things as caveats to say that I usually just say accept the offer.
That's fair.
It is so hard to get a job right now as a junior software engineer, barring something that is so egregiously low it is unsustainable for your family, or barring some toxic work environment. I think the answer is yes to that first offer. And then once you've proven that you can do the work, you can revisit it in 6 months, maybe a year. And maybe that's your negotiation, is saying yes to the salary now, but in 6 months, I want to be able to talk about this once I've had a chance to prove myself, and you go from there.
I was going to say those, the bargaining chips are a lot different once you're, even for me, like 2.5 years in, I'm able to have a lot more leverage about what I can negotiate just compared to when I first entered. Cause now like I've proven myself, or like, I like to think I've proven myself. Like you have results here. And so you have a lot more negotiation power when doing that. And so it is always interesting to see people, how they coach it. But I do agree with you. Definitely just take the first offer, especially in today's markets.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause once you have, it sounds like it's the same in sales, but software engineering, the magic number appears to be 4 years. I was working with the hire.com. I was on a panel for theirs early in the year. And for them, the threshold was about 4 years, and below they considered entry level, and that market tanked at the beginning of this year. And it was engulfed by an increase in demand for those with 4+ years of experience.
It's interesting.
So, I mean, get whatever experience you can, in my opinion. And I wouldn't be too picky about the first role, and just know it's not going to be your dream job. It's not going to be the dream hours. It's probably not going to be the dream salary or at the dream location. I feel bad saying that because I feel like I'm crushing a lot of people's dreams, but
you're good.
Yeah. On your second, maybe your third job, once you have some leverage there, once you have some market value that's been objectively determined by where you've worked, you have more negotiating leverage to find what actually you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are about to wrap up here, but I don't want to end on that note. I do want to end up on a happy note. So can you just give us what advice would you just give right now to software developers that are looking for their first entry-level job? It's a hard market out there right now. We just gave a ton of advice. Was there advice that I missed out on that we should share, or what advice would you have?
I would say, general, broad speaking, there's no one piece of advice that I can give that can answer all of your problems. But I think a lot of the content here was very helpful. So my advice would be to just stay connected with as many sources of information about the job search as you can, so that you can stay up to date on the latest best practices. So Ryan, I'll say shout out to this show right here. We talked about actionable job search advice. You have regular interviews. We talk about the current market. Subscribe and listen to further episodes so that you can get modern modern tips on how to succeed in the job search. Shameless plug for myself. I
was
also have
gonna
my
say, you
own
got it.
podcast, right? The Junior Jobs Podcast. We also focus on providing actionable job search advice for new software engineers from non-traditional backgrounds. We're also on YouTube, Spotify, all of the major platforms. So those two I would highly recommend you stay engaged with if you're looking for some ongoing advice for how to get a job in tech.
And everyone, definitely check out Erik's podcast. It is awesome. I took a listen before this episode. And if you are a software engineer that is looking for their first gigs, needs advice, Erik dives into the depths of the ocean to give you that to you. So, Erik, thank you so much for being here. A ton of great advice that you have on here. And yeah, thank you so much. Everyone, definitely please go check out Erik Andersen. You were awesome.
Thank you.